Are you living entirely from the neck up? Like, think about it for a second. You're sitting in a meeting, and maybe your boss says something, a little passive-aggressive.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. And instantly your mind just starts racing. You're spinning up, I don't know, 20 different comebacks in your head. You're worrying about your job security. You're plotting an entirely new career path.
And completely ignoring your body.
Exactly. Meanwhile, you haven't even noticed that your jaw is clenched shut, your shoulders are practically touching your ears, and your heart is just beating out of your chest. We spend so much of our time completely lost in these mental narratives.
We really do. It's like we're just floating heads.
Yeah. And so today, we're taking a deep dive into exactly that, how to actually draw back into the reality of the present moment. And we've got an incredible stack of sources today. We're looking specifically at chapters 4 and 5 of Tara Brach's book, Radical Acceptance, along with some really fascinating companion workshop notes.
It's such a phenomenal text to explore.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the exact tools you need to stop fighting your own messy life.
Right.
To become less reactive and cultivate a genuinely more peaceful existence.
Yeah, and to really set the stage for how we approach this, the author brings up this famous poem by the 13th century mystic Rumi. It's called The Guest House.
Oh, I love that one.
It's so good. In it, he suggests that being human is like running a guest house, and every single morning brings a new arrival, like a joy, a depression, a meanness. And he says we should welcome and entertain them all.
Even the really bad ones.
Right, even the dark thoughts, the shame, the malice. We're literally supposed to meet them at the door laughing and invite them in, treating them as unexpected visitors.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because,
Yeah.
meeting shame at the door laughing sounds incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it's a tall order.
It sounds beautiful in a 13th century poem, but trying to actually welcome these unwanted guests into our lives without them completely trashing the living room is, well, it's a completely different story.
That is the core challenge, absolutely. And I think before we can learn how to accept those difficult feelings, we really have to look at why we fight them so hard in the first place.
Right. Why is our default setting just total resistance?
Well, what the sources point out is that we're constantly battling our own reality because of these hidden standards of perfection. Like, we carry around this idealized blueprint of what our lives, our minds, and our emotions should look like.
And when reality doesn't match the blueprint, we freak out.
Exactly. We resist it with everything we have.
Which reminds me of that story in the text, the one about the Zen cook, Ed Brown. It illustrates this perfectly. So he was working at a mountain retreat center, and by all accounts, he was an amazing cook.
Oh, yeah. People loved his food.
But he was just incredibly frustrated because he could not get his homemade biscuits to come out right.
Yeah.
He kept changing the ingredients, tweaking the recipes, and just getting more and more annoyed.
Until he finally had this realization about what was actually driving his frustration. He realized he was unconsciously trying to recreate perfectly packaged, canned Pillsbury biscuits.
Which is so funny. Like, of all things, Pillsbury biscuits.
Right. But that manufactured uniform product was his hidden standard. And the moment he let go of that impossible ideal, he could finally taste the biscuits he was actually making.
Which were probably delicious.
They were. He described them as sunny, earthy, real. The suffering wasn't in the biscuits themselves, The suffering was entirely in the comparison to a beautifully packaged artificial product.
It's like we are constantly trying to curate an Instagram feed for our own souls.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Like, we want the lighting to be perfect on our emotional growth. We want to be the enlightened, calm person all the time.
Yeah.
But reality is actually all the messy outtakes.
Yeah, the blurry, unflattering photos. Which really raises an important question for you listening right now. Where in your life are you trying to bake a Pillsbury biscuit?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like, are you expecting your relationship to be this seamless romantic comedy? Are you expecting your career path to have absolutely no messy detours?
Probably yes to both for most people.
Right. So what would you actually experience if you put down that hidden standard of perfection and just tasted the reality of the moment you're currently in?
But, and this is the hard part, when those messy outtakes happen, when we fail to meet that standard, we tend to panic.
Right.
Which the text relates to the Buddhist story of Mara.
Yes, the demon Mara.
Right. So when the Buddha was sitting and achieving enlightenment, he was visited by Mara, who essentially represents difficult emotions, fear, temptation, all that stuff. But the Buddha didn't, like, draw a sword and fight him.
No, he didn't fight at all. And throughout the Buddha's life, Mara would just continue to make these unexpected appearances. But instead of ignoring him or driving him away, the Buddha would calmly acknowledge him.
He'd actually talk to him.
Yeah, he would say, I see you, Mara. And he would literally offer the demon a cushion and serve him tea as an honored guest. He just entirely dropped the resistance.
Okay, serving tea to a bad mood or, a moment of temptation makes sense. But how do we practically serve tea to a demon that is truly terrifying? Like, the text brings up the story of a man named Jacob, and it's a scenario where dropping that resistance feels almost impossible.
Yeah, Jacob's story is a really profound example of this practice applied to real visceral suffering. So Jacob was a clinical psychologist and a longtime meditator who developed Alzheimer's.
Which is just devastating.
It is. And in the mid-stages of the disease, he was invited to give a talk to over 100 students. So he sat down at the front of the hall, looked out at the crowd, and suddenly his mind just went completely blank.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He didn't know where he was, he didn't know what he was doing, and his heart was just pounding with absolute terror.
I mean, that is the ultimate nightmare scenario for anyone, let alone someone acutely aware that they are losing their cognitive function.
Yeah.
I think most of us in that situation would just try to fake it or run out of the room or, I don't know, internally collapse.
And most people would. But Jacob didn't run. He put his palms together, bowed his head slightly, and just started naming his internal experience out loud to the room.
He just told them what was happening.
Literally sat there and said, afraid, embarrassed, confused, feeling like I'm failing, powerless, shaking, sense of dying, sinking, lost. He didn't try to scramble for his notes or pretend everything was fine. He just kept naming his reality as he sat there.
And what actually happens when someone does that? Because it sounds like it would just make the panic worse.
It's counterintuitive, but by not fighting the terrifying reality of his failing mind, his body began to relax.
Wow.
Yeah, because the resistance is what causes the panic. By serving tea to his confusion, the sheer terror just dissipated. He looked up, apologized to the room, and the students were in tears. They told him his presence in that moment was the deepest teaching they had ever received.
That gives me chills.
It's incredible. Jacob practiced what the text calls unconditional friendliness. He didn't make his fading mind the enemy. He bowed to it.
Okay, that level of acceptance is incredible. But, and I can hear people listening asking this, if we try to apply this to our everyday lives, I can see a really practical challenge.
Sure. What is it?
If I'm furious at a coworker who, say, threw me under the bus, or I'm feeling intensely jealous, and I just say yes to my anger or my jealousy, aren't I giving myself a free pass to act out? Like, if I welcome the anger, doesn't that mean I'm going to start screaming at people?
I am so glad you asked that, because that is the single most common misconception about this practice, and the text is very careful to address it directly. It's the distinction of saying yes without approving.
Okay, yes without approving.
Right. Saying yes is an inner practice of allowing a feeling to arise. It does not mean saying yes to harmful external behaviors. It doesn't mean staying in an abusive situation. And it certainly doesn't mean you endorse the desire to scream at your coworker.
So you are saying yes to the existence of the emotion, not the behavior it wants to trigger.
Exactly. You're simply acknowledging the biological and emotional reality that, hey, anger has arrived in your guest house. When you fight the anger or deny it, it actually takes control of your subconscious behavior.
It leaks out anyway.
Yeah, you get passive-aggressive or you snap at someone else. By saying yes to the experience of the emotion, you're actually creating the space needed so you don't automatically act on it.
That makes total sense. Saying yes to everyday anger is one thing. But what happens when the emotion isn't just a bad mood, but a total shattering of your identity?
That's a whole different level.
Right. What happens when saying yes feels impossible because your reality is falling apart? The text explores this extreme through a businessman named Carl. So Carl was highly successful, but he lost $20 million in the dot-com crash.
$20 million, yeah.
And he ended up filing for bankruptcy. He was absolutely consumed by shame, convinced he was a total failure as a provider, and terrified his family would leave him.
And when you're spiraling in that kind of profound shame, you can't just flip a mental switch and accept it. Your nervous system is in complete overdrive.
You're just in survival mode.
Exactly. And this is where the text introduces specific mindfulness tools. The first is inquiry. Now, Western psychology often relies on asking, why do I feel this way? We always want to analyze the root cause.
But asking why, when you're panicked, usually just spins up more mental stories. Like if you ask Carl why he feels like a failure, he's going to start analyzing the stock market, his past business decisions, his childhood. It just feeds that intellectual loop.
Precisely. Asking why engages the neocortex and keeps you trapped in the narrative. The mindfulness tool of inquiry is different. It asks, what is happening right now, and what inside me is asking for acceptance.
Oh, that cuts right through the story.
It really does.
Because when the author visited Carl, he was slumped in a chair, bitter and terrified. And she didn't ask him about his portfolio. She gently asked him, Carl, what's happening right now? What inside you most needs attention?
And he didn't give a business analysis.
No. He just said, I feel like an absolute failure. And then he started describing the cold sweats, the knots in his gut, the physical gripping around his heart.
Right. He moved from the narrative of his failure into the actual somatic experience of his pain. And that transitions into the second tool, which is naming or noting.
Sure.
When you ask, what is happening right now? You gently whisper a label for it in your mind, like tight, tight, or afraid, afraid.
Just a whisper.
Yeah, you keep it soft, almost like a whisper in the background of your mind.
The text actually compares this naming practice to traditional shamanic rituals, which I thought was a fascinating parallel.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor.
In those traditions, the belief is that if a shaman can name the specific spirit causing the illness, the spirit is subdued. It loses its control over the victim simply by being identified.
And what's really fascinating here is the neuroscience behind that shamanic metaphor. When we softly name our pain, we are engaging a different part of the brain. We're literally shifting neural activity away from the amygdala, the fear center, and creating psychological distance. Yeah, we are stripping the emotion of its power to operate in the shadows just by saying, I see you, fear.
So what does this all mean for someone in Carl's shoes? I think it means these tools, inquiry and naming, aren't actually about fixing the external problem. Like, Carl was still bankrupt.
Yes, the money was still gone.
Right. The tools are about waking up to the fact that we are in pain and pausing the mental spin cycle long enough to realize it. When Carl stopped denying that he was hurting, and he clearly saw his own physical and emotional suffering, the door naturally opened to self-compassion. He finally broke down and wept. Not out of bitterness, but out of grief. He reconnected with his own heart.
But notice what had to happen for Carl to find that compassion. He had to locate the feeling in his body. To truly name these feelings, we can't stay up in our heads. We have to figure out where these emotions actually live.
And they don't live in our thoughts.
No, they live in our physical biology. The text calls the body the ground of radical acceptance.
Ground zero. Because, going back to our earlier point, we really do live from the neck up most of the time. We just treat our bodies like they're, I don't know, a vehicle to carry our brains from meeting to meeting.
We absolutely do. And to understand why we need to drop into the body to find peace, we have to understand a mechanism the text calls the waterfall of reactivity.
The waterfall of reactivity.
Right. So our minds instantly and unconsciously judge every single physical sensation as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Evolutionarily, we're wired to grasp at the pleasant ones and resist the unpleasant ones.
Which makes sense for survival.
Sure, but in modern life, this constant low-grade grasping and resisting creates a waterfall of reactivity. It keeps our nervous system agitated and keeps us completely disconnected from the present moment.
And all of our interpersonal dramas seem to spring directly from this biological reactivity. There is this incredibly relatable story the author shares about her teenage son, Narayan.
Oh, this one is so good.
It's so real. He was constantly playing violent video games, his grades were slipping, and their relationship had just devolved into this toxic standoff of nagging on her part and defensiveness on his.
A classic parent-teen dynamic.
Exactly. So one night, she is standing outside his bedroom door, hearing the gunfire of the game through the door, and she is just boiling over. She is ready to barge in and start a massive fight.
And if she had barged in, she would have been riding that waterfall of reactivity. But instead, she utilizes the power of the pause. She stands in the hallway and consciously drops below her mental story.
Because the story in her head is loud. It's saying he's irresponsible, he's ruining his life, he doesn't respect me.
Right, but she ignores the story and focuses entirely on the physical sensations in her body.
She notices the mounting physical pressure in her chest and throat. Her jaw is clenched, her face is flushed.
And here is where the mechanism of dropping into the body works its magic. And it isn't magic, of course. It's nervous system regulation. Anger is almost always a secondary defensive emotion. It's a shield.
It's protecting something else.
Exactly. By refusing to engage with the mental story, which is what feeds the anger, and instead just sitting with the raw physical discomfort in her chest, her nervous system begins to downregulate. The defensive anger burns off, exposing the vulnerable emotion underneath it.
The text describes how the anger literally melted into a tight ache in her heart, and that ache was fear. The underlying fear was, I'm a bad parent, I've failed him.
But she doesn't run from the fear either.
No, she stays with that physical sensation and it melts again. This time it softens into a heavy, sinking grief, and finally it opens up into deep love and tenderness for her son.
And because she did that, the interpersonal dynamic completely changes. Because she shifted her relationship to her own physical discomfort. When she finally turned the doorknob and walked into the room, she wasn't attacking him. She was peaceful.
She could actually talk to him.
Yeah, she could listen to him. And they ended up having a warm, connective conversation. If she had stayed in her head, reacting to the story rather than the sensation, it would have been just another screaming match.
Which brings me to a question for you, the listener. Think of a recent conflict you had. Maybe with a partner, a kid, a boss. Picture that moment right before you snapped or sent that defensive text.
We all have one of those moments recently.
Right. If you had paused in that exact moment to notice the raw physical sensations in your body, like a tight chest, a clenched jaw, a burning in your stomach, how might the outcome have been different? What if you had just stayed with that burning sensation until the underlying fear or sadness revealed itself, instead of projecting the anger outward?
It is a profound shift in how we handle conflict. But, it leads to the obvious next question. If the body is where we find peace, resolution, and connection, why do we avoid our physical sensations so desperately? Why do we prefer to live from the neck up?
Why is it so hard to just feel it?
The answer the text provides is foundational, because pain is scary, and our culture has taught us to fear it and fix it immediately.
We really do treat pain like it's a glitch in the matrix, like something has gone fundamentally wrong. The author talks about her experience with natural childbirth, which illustrates this perfectly. She was doing great at first, breathing through the intense pain, just going with the flow.
But then it shifted.
Yeah, the pain spiked sharply, and instantly she attached a cognitive story to it. The story was, something's going wrong. This is too much. And the second she added that mental story of fear to the physical sensation, her body tensed up, she stopped breathing naturally, and she went into total panic.
Which is such a natural reaction. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text references John Kabat-Zinn's philosophy on mindfulness and pain. He points out that pain itself is just a messenger. It's biological feedback.
It's data.
Right. But when we react with the story of fear, we try to kill the messenger. We tense our muscles, we fight it, we try to numb it. The crucial realization is that pain is inevitable in life, but suffering is optional. Our fear of the pain and our physical resistance to it is almost always much, much worse than the raw sensation of the pain itself.
When we say something is wrong, we trap the pain inside us. We lock it in. And this doesn't just apply to, stubbing your toe or having a difficult conversation. The text goes into how this applies to deep psychological trauma as well.
Yes. To show how deeply the body holds on to unaccepted pain, the text brings up the story of Rosalie. Rosalie was a survivor of severe, repeated childhood abuse. To survive that unimaginable environment, she did what many trauma survivors brilliantly do. She dissociated.
She checked out of her body.
She severed the connection between her mind and her body so she wouldn't have to feel the unbearable physical and emotional pain. It was a survival tactic.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because while dissociation is a brilliant defense mechanism for a child, it outlives its usefulness in adulthood. Through guided meditation, Rosalie visualized the architecture of her dissociation. She pictured what she called a good fairy who helped her survive by locking things away.
Like a physical fortress.
Literally. In her mind, she had locked her rage in her belly. She had sealed her pelvis to protect herself from the abuse, and she had built a thick, heavy fortress around her ribcage to protect her breaking heart.
And how did she heal from that? Because she couldn't heal by just sitting on a therapist's couch and talking intellectually about her past.
No, the talking cure wasn't enough.
Because the intellect wasn't where the trauma was stored. The trauma was locked in the physical tissue. She had to literally, patiently breathe light and awareness back into those specific physical areas of her body. She had to slowly, safely feel the terrifying physical sensations she had locked away decades ago.
Because, as Rumi says, the cure for the pain is in the pain.
The body keeps the score, and the only way out is through. Experiencing those locked away physical sensations is the biological key to genuine healing. It's about returning home to the body, even when the house is currently filled with really difficult, terrifying guests.
So let's bring this all together. What have we actually uncovered in this deep dive into radical acceptance? First, we have to recognize and drop our Pillsbury biscuit standards, those impossible expectations that keep us at war with our messy reality.
Drop the perfect standards. Check.
Second, we have to invite Mara to tea. When difficult emotions arise, we use inquiry, asking what is happening right now instead of why. And we use naming, softly noting the feeling so we can observe the emotion rather than being possessed by it.
Saying yes to the feeling, not the behavior.
Exactly. And finally, we have to bravely drop from the swirling stories in our heads and inhabit the raw physical sensations in our bodies, knowing that pain is just a messenger. When we do these things, we naturally regulate our nervous systems. We become less reactive, much more peaceful, and incredibly compassionate to ourselves and the people around us.
And as we practice this, something even deeper happens. There's a beautiful story the author shares near the end of the text. She was at a New England meditation retreat, and she became chronically physically sick for days. Oh, that's the worst, getting sick on a retreat.
It is, and she was caught in the trance of resistance, right? Her mind was spinning. Something is wrong with me, my body is failing, I'm missing the retreat. The mental fear was just compounding her physical symptoms. But eventually she went out into the woods, she sat against a tree on the firm earth, and she finally stopped fighting the illness. She dropped the story and just felt the raw, tight ache in her stomach and the heavy exhaustion in her bones.
And as she stopped resisting, she noticed the boundaries between herself and the world began to dissolve. She realized the aches in her stomach were just moving energy, no different than the wind moving through the trees or the leaves falling to the firm earth.
She had this profound realization,
She said, "It is not my pain, it is the earth's pain."
which is just a brilliant realization that suffering isn't a personal failing. It is a universal condition. We all share it. Which brings to mind the quote from the Japanese artist Hokusai that she mentions. Look, feel, let life take you by the hand, let life live through you. We spend so much time trying to manage, control, and push away our uncomfortable feelings, treating them like personal defects or glitches in our operating system.
When really they're just part of being alive.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. The next time you feel a deep, uncomfortable emotion, like a wave of grief, a flash of hot anger, or a sinking sense of fear, what if you stopped viewing it as your isolated personal flaw? What if instead you stopped resisting, dropped into your body, and saw that discomfort as the very energy of life living through you? An ancient shared human experience connecting you directly to the heartbeat of every other person on Earth.